Welcome back. Today, we're diving right into a really fascinating explainer of a recent Fox News broadcast. We'll be unpacking some heavy-hitting geopolitical analysis featuring former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman. We're looking at a completely critical moment in global security here, examining multiple overlapping flashpoints all happening at once. This isn't just about one isolated conflict, it's about how the entire geopolitical chessboard is connected. So let's map out exactly what is at stake on the world stage right now.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the historic NATO summit, the Iran inflection point, Russia's war in Ukraine, Putin's threat to Europe, and finally, NATO's deterrence strategy.
Starting with Section 1, the historic NATO Summit, focusing specifically on Turkey and the F-35s. So, to really grasp the gravity of this analysis, we need to set this scene. The broadcast highlights the U.S. president arriving in Turkey to meet with President Erdogan. And a massive point of discussion here: Turkey's potential access to the highly advanced F-35 military aircraft program. Dan Hoffman characterizes this as a historic summit. It's essentially a high-stakes negotiation involving top-tier military assets happening right at the literal crossroads of Europe and the Middle East. Moving right along to Section 2, the Iran inflection point, and a pause for negotiation. Hoffman uses a very specific term here, an inflection point. It's basically a time of significant change. He notes that when it comes to the situation with Iran, we're currently in this delicate, fragile pause. But, within this pause lies a real window of opportunity. The broadcast points out that we might actually be looking at future negotiations, provided Iran comes to the table in good faith. It's a pivotal moment where the entire trajectory could shift toward diplomacy. All right, Section 3, Russia's war in Ukraine and their contrasting tactics. So the crucial point here is made pretty bluntly by Dan Hoffman. He says, quote, Russia has never achieved their strategic objective. He actually goes as far as describing it as a war Russia is losing. According to this analysis, a primary agenda item for NATO isn't just managing the conflict itself, but actively discussing how to manage Russia's ongoing defeat. It's a bold assessment for sure, and it frames Russia not as this unstoppable force, but as a failing adversary. The broadcast then dives into a really stark comparison of military strategies. The Fox News host explicitly outlines two totally different approaches. On one hand, you have Ukrainian tactics, which involve using long-range missiles to wreak havoc on the Russian war engine. Think oil, gas, and refineries. In sharp contrast to that, the host explicitly claims that Russian tactics involve aiming for apartment buildings, going so far as to state that the Russians, quote, want to kill children. The analysis heavily emphasizes this dichotomy of a targeted Ukrainian defense against a civilian-focused Russian offensive. Now, this brings us to a highly suspenseful pivot in the broadcast. The host asks a great question. If the Russians currently have their hands full and are basically just holding on against Ukraine, why is it that so many fear they will expand their target list? It's kind of a paradox, right? If they're struggling so much in Ukraine, why is the rest of Europe so on edge? Which leads us to Section 4, Putin's threat to Europe, focusing on deterrence and hybrid operations. Hoffman answers that paradox we just talked about by analyzing Vladimir Putin's underlying psychology. Putin has actively threatened Europe, trying to make them believe that supporting Ukraine will result in Russian attacks against their own countries. But Hoffman points out that these threats are actually a calculated effort to deter European nations. The whole goal is to fracture Allied support and prevent Europe from going all in to help the Ukrainians. Shared intelligence actually indicates Russia isn't currently planning a traditional military invasion of Europe. So how exactly does Russia project power without a traditional invasion? Well, through what Hoffman calls hybrid operations. The broadcast specifically cites two known examples of these non-traditional methods. First, violating airspace in the Baltic states, and second, reportedly targeting the Prime Minister's office over in the UK. It's a disruptive expansion of operations designed to keep allies completely off balance without actually triggering a full-scale war. And finally, Section 5, NATO's deterrence strategy, which comes down to unity and intelligence. Hoffman lays out a really clear strategic roadmap for Europe to manage these massive challenges. Step 1, call Putin's bluff and go all in on supporting Ukraine, proving his deterrence tactics are failing. Step 2 is to share vital intelligence. Knowing that Russia isn't planning broader military strikes prevents unnecessary panic among member states. And Step 3, project unified strength. NATO absolutely must stand together to show Russia they're prepared for these hybrid operations and can successfully deter them. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen just how complex this global chessboard is right now. From F-35 negotiations and a delicate pause with Iran to a grinding war in Ukraine and hybrid operations in the UK. The stakes literally couldn't be higher. So the question I want to leave you with today is this. As these non-traditional, hybrid threats continue to evolve and target the very heart of European capitals, will NATO's reliance on intelligence sharing and unified strength actually be enough to maintain global deterrence in the years to come? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and keep learning.